I'm Miss Lisa. You might know me from such hit YouTube videos as Algebra, an Introduction, or Geometry, Points, Lines, and Planes. Today we're going to talk about Algebra, section 2.5 in your book, multiplication of real numbers. Now, I already sort of taught this because they were already giving you homework on it. I'm looking around for my eraser. This is my cat, Ruby, being mad because we had rescued some kittens and she smelt the kittens. So Ruby's got to go away. But anyway, so let's review. If you're multiplying and you have a positive times a positive, what do you get? That's right, a positive number. If you have a positive times a negative number, what do you get? A negative number. And if you have a negative times a negative, weirdly, you get a positive because two negatives make a positive. Now, how you remember that is grammar, because we follow this in grammar too. If you have two negatives, it makes it positive. If you don't have no bananas, you've got some bananas. And I know it's hard for us Southerners because we're used to double negatives, but just remember that. You're not supposed to use them, even though we do in the South. All right, so if you look on page 93 in the book, if you're following along, it's this book that we're using, McDougall-Littell, Algebra. And they show you that, like, if you multiply positive 3 times negative 3. 3 times 3 is 9. We have a positive and a negative, so it's negative 9. So let's look at some example problems to just show you this. But I think this will be one of the easiest things. And remember, if it doesn't have letters, you can just put it in your calculator, and your calculator will do it right also. So if you have negative 3 times 4, that's pretty messy, sorry about that, times negative 2, right? So a negative times a positive is a negative, then negative times negative, this is going to be a positive answer. 3 times 4 is 12, 12 times 2 is 24. Ta-da! So not too bad, right? So if you have two negatives, even if there's three things being multiplied, it's going to be positive. If you have one negative, it'll be negative. If you have three negatives, it will also be negative, and I'll show you what I mean on the next one. It's negative 1/2 times negative 2 times negative 3. All right? So a half times 2 is 1 because you're cutting it in half. But you can do it in your calculator if you don't know how to do it in your head like I just did. Two negatives make a positive. A positive times a negative is negative. So this is going to end up being 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. And remember, you can use parentheses in your calculator for multiplication too. You can put it in just like this. Beginning parentheses, negative 1/2, in parentheses, beginning parentheses, etc., and you'll have it. All right? Okay, what about if you have negative 1 to the 4th power? Well, that means negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1. Those two negatives make a positive, and those two negatives make a positive. So our answer is going to be positive 1. Try it on your calculator. Oh, and I forgot to tell y'all this. Super important. Pay attention. If you are doing exponents, I think I forgot to tell you this. You got to put these parentheses if it's negative. Otherwise, your calculator doesn't understand that it's negative 1 to the 4th power. If you put this in your calculator, it doesn't understand that the negative goes with the 1. Your calculator reads it as an understood negative 1 times 1 to the 4th power, which would 1 to the 4th power is 1 times negative 1 would be negative 1, and it's the wrong answer. When I was in school, if you had negative 1 to the 4th power, you knew that was positive 1. But now, because of the calculators, they will write it with the parentheses to make it 1, showing that that negative goes with the 1. So that's something that sort of changed in math since I was your age, because of the TI-84 graphing calculators, which are the ones that colleges let you use and stuff. So that's the one to do. All right. Yes, and that's what it says. Look at the bottom of page 93. They say, make sure you understand that this is not the same thing as that. Because you've got to use those little parentheses. All right. Now, what about if we have letters? Let's add letters to it. Watch my time here. Whoop, whoop, whoop. More fun with sound effects. Whoop, 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 whoop. See? It's like a video game, erasing the board. All right. Look at the top of page 94, and we have negative 2, boy that's messy, times, I think, negative x. Is that right? Okay. So, 2 negatives make what? A positive. So this is going to be positive. And if you are multiplying a number times a letter, you just write them next to each other. So the answer is just positive 2x. Okay, let's do this one. 3 times negative n times negative n. I think it says times negative n. Let's make sure I wrote down the right problem. It always helps to write down the right problem. Okay, so if you have numbers times letters, you just write them next to each other. And how many negative n's do we have? We have 3 of them. And 2 negatives make a positive. A positive times a negative makes a negative. You write the negative out front, right there. Not too bad, right? Now that we're introducing letters. Okay, let's try our next one. I need to go get my other eraser where I stop losing this one. I can set it on the thing. This one's supposed to magnet to the board, but this board doesn't magnet, so. All right, negative 1 times, I'm just going to write a dot instead of parentheses. Well, I should hear negative a squared. Okay, negative a times negative a, 2 negatives make a positive, so that's positive. But we have a negative here. Altogether, 3 negatives is negative, because you end up with positive times negative is negative. 1 times a is just 1. And you actually just write it like this. But that negative 1, we make it an understood 1, because we're all cool in algebra, and we like things, you know, to be sort of like for the club that understands that there, for the inner circle, we algebra people understand that there is a negative 1 there. It's called an understood negative 1. Ta-da! Now, would it be wrong if you wrote the 1 there? No, it's just not cool. It's not the way we do it. We have a certain math coolness, believe it or not, which is probably geeky. All right, let's try another one. Negative y to the 4th power. This, the 4th power only goes for what's in the parentheses. So it's negative y to the 4th power, because it's the same thing as this y to the 4th power being multiplied by an understood negative 1. The more, if this seems hard, don't worry. It's going to get easier, I promise. It'll start making sense. All right, if you look at the green box on page 94, you get the names of some of these properties. The first one is the commutative property, and I just think of it as the order doesn't matter for multiplication. Now, so if they ever make me queen of math, we're going to change some of these names because they just really aren't all that good. But it's 2 times 3 is the same thing as 3 times 2. Both are 6. The order doesn't matter. The next one is the associative property. And this is, which one do you do first doesn't matter. You could do 2 times 3 is 6 times 4 is 24. Or you could do 3 times 4 is 12 times 2 is 24. It doesn't matter. So that's the associative property. And you can think of it as which ones you associate together. That one's a little easier to remember the name. The identity property, any identity property, it equals itself. So the identity property for multiplication is multiplying by 1. If you multiply 3 times 1, you get 3. And remember, the identity property for addition is plus 0. If you add 0, you get the thing back again. You get it itself, its identity. In multiplying the 0 property, not the identity property, but the 0 property, is that if you multiply anything times 0, you get 0. And the property of opposites is the opposite of plus 3 is minus 3. The opposite of, this is the negative one. Remember, what makes math hard is not the math, it's the words. In a different book, sometimes they call these slightly different names. And in the pre-algebra book, they were calling opposites what we're going to call opposites later in this class. So it's something a little bit different. Don't let that confuse you. Alright, so the opposite property is if you multiply negative 1 times a, you get negative a. So it's how do you get, it's similar, how do you get turn a into its opposite? That looks like a 9. You multiply by negative 1. We'll turn it into the opposite side. Okay, alright, so that's it for multiplication. The rest I think you can read and make sense. Math is fun.